Most people think that blood sugar problems are only for diabetics or people that eat junk food all day. But the truth is, if you're struggling to lose weight, you feel tired after meals, or you hit that afternoon slump every day, you might already be on the path to metabolic dysfunction. And it's not your fault. There's a lot of information out there, and much of it is confusing or just outdated. So in this video, we're gonna walk through a 4-phase blood sugar reset. And I've used this successfully working one-on-one with over 50 different clients, from busy parents to tech executives, even medical professionals. And the goal with this reset is to help you rebuild your insulin sensitivity, burn off stubborn belly fat, and regain consistent high energy. Here's exactly what it's gonna cover. Phase 1 is focused on helping you stabilize your blood sugar. Phase 2, we start to rebuild your insulin sensitivity. Phase 3 is focused on helping you heal your metabolism. And phase 4 is making sure that this is sustainable for the rest of your life. In each phase, I'm gonna walk you through what to do week by week using practical science-based steps that you can start today. Each phase actually builds on the phase before it. So by phase 3, your metabolism is actually gonna start to heal itself. And in phase 3 specifically, I'm gonna share with you a really simple tweak that you can make to your nutrition approach that'll help enhance your results. Most people skip it, but it's a key difference between short-term results and long-term success. Let's jump into phase 1. This phase is focused on helping you stabilize your blood sugar. So everything we're about to talk about is weeks 1 and 2 of this reset. The goal here is to help you reduce glucose or blood sugar spikes so that you can keep your insulin at a lower level. This is ultimately going to give the cells in your body that produce insulin, the beta cells in your pancreas, a much needed break so that they can recover and ultimately end up more efficient. The first part of this reset is completely optional. If you have access to a continuous glucose monitor, absolutely use it. If you have access to previous blood work looking at fasting glucose or HbA1c, or even better, fasting insulin, you want to have that as a reference point. And the first thing you're going to do in phase 1 is make sure that all your meals are eaten in this order: high fiber vegetables, then your proteins and fats, and then your carbohydrates. By eating fiber first, you're basically laying down a mesh in your stomach that's going to slow down the absorption of carbohydrates. And the alternative here, if you have gut dysbiosis or you find that you're bloated when you eat fiber, is to cut out fiber and carbohydrates altogether. So in that case, you're going to focus your meals entirely around proteins and fats. The next part of this phase is after every single meal, I want you to walk for 10 to 15 minutes or do 15 to 20 bodyweight squats. If you're a high achiever and want faster results, you can do both, but you want to make sure you're doing this after every single meal. This is going to make your muscles hungry for glucose, so it's going to help your beta cells by lowering the need for insulin. Your muscle's going to eat up some of that blood sugar so that your body doesn't have to produce as much insulin to get it into your cells. And data shows this can actually reduce blood glucose spikes after meals by up to 30%. The third part of this phase, and this is probably the single most important rule in this entire video, is to eliminate GPS. So I call this the no GPS rule: grains, potatoes, and sugar. I have an entirely separate video on GPS and why you need to pay attention to this, so you can check that out here. When it comes to grains, potatoes, and sugar, we're talking about white bread, white rice, juices, sodas, cereal, granola, and white potatoes. In other words, we're cutting out all of the simple carbohydrates in your diet, at least for the time being, because those are the things that are gonna spike your blood glucose and your need for insulin the most. Last part of this phase is to hydrate pretty aggressively. I recommend trying to drink 2 to 3 liters of water every single day. This can help flush your system and also reduce dehydration that comes from high blood sugar. And as a bonus, it can also help with your fat metabolism. Last thing I'm gonna suggest here for this first phase is to drink something every morning that I typically refer to as the morning elixir. With your first glass of water, 12 to 16 ounces, you want to add a tablespoon of raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar, and you want it with the mother. Those are the probiotics in it. Then I would add a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon, and it needs to be specifically Ceylon cinnamon, and then another teaspoon of ground ginger. I won't get into all the biochemistry behind why this is such a powerful combination. The important thing to know, it's gonna help you reduce those blood sugar spikes. Okay, now on to phase 2, and this is where we're really leaning into rebuilding your insulin sensitivity. This is gonna cover weeks 3 through 6 of this reset. And the goal is to improve the cellular response to insulin. What that means is your cells become more receptive to insulin bringing them glucose for fuel. And when they become more receptive, you're gonna need less of insulin to do that. So here's what I want you to start by doing. I want you to start with some time-restricted eating, otherwise known as intermittent fasting. And you can start really simple, 12-12, meaning for 12 hours of the day, you're not eating. For 12 hours of the day, you are eating. This should be pretty simple considering most of us sleep 7+ hours a night, ideally. An example might be you have your first meal of the day at 7 a.m. and you finish up your last meal before 7 p.m. Then over the course of week 3 and 4, I want you to transition to an 18-6 window, meaning 18 hours of the day you're not eating and 6 hours of the day you are eating. Your hunger hormones usually adjust by 30 to 45 minutes per day. Meaning if you start with 12-12 and each day you move your window back by 30 minutes, you should be able to do this without feeling intense hunger cravings. The end goal is gonna look something like having your first meal at 1 p.m. and having your last meal end before 7 p.m. So again, you're eating in that 6-hour window. For the other 18 hours, you're giving your body a break from food, which is much needed so that it can repair. The second thing that I want you to add during weeks 3 through 6 is some resistance training. And I would personally recommend trying to do this 2 to 3 times per week. This doesn't mean you need to go to the gym and use a barbell and be loading it up with plates. This can be as simple as doing some body weight exercises. But the key here is that you're focused on strength and resistance because muscle is your most metabolically active tissue. So when you are building strength and activating your muscle tissues with resistance, you are making it more hungry for glucose. So again, you're lowering your need for insulin. If you don't know where to start, I would recommend trying a body weight card deck workout. I'm gonna explain this in depth in another video. Once that's uploaded, you can find it here. In simple terms, this means you go through a deck of cards. Each of the face cards is 10. Everything else is the number that's reflected on the card. You're going to assign one body weight exercise to each suit. So maybe you're doing push-ups every time you flip a spade, body weight squats every time you flip a club, dead bugs every time you flip a diamond, and burpees every time you flip a heart. It's up to you what you want to assign to them. The point is, it should be focused on resistance training using your body weight, and you basically want to go through the entire deck, just flipping the cards and doing the amount that's shown on the card of the exercise for the suit that's shown. Next thing I want you to do during phase 2, weeks 3 through 6, is to add more soluble fiber to your diet. This might include avocado, flax seeds, lentils, and my personal favorite, soaking chia seeds overnight in a mason jar and then drinking it in the morning. Fiber is critical for slowing glucose absorption. And as long as you don't have gut dysbiosis, it also helps your digestion. And the thing is, your fat tissue is where your body stores toxins. So once you start activating and burning through some of the fat, your body's naturally going to release more toxins into your bloodstream. Fiber acts like a sponge to soak up some of those toxins so that you don't deal with brain fog or headaches or fatigue. Last but not least, during this phase, I want you to make sure that when you eat your first meal, you are getting 30 grams of complete protein. This is going to help you stabilize your glucose and blunt cravings or energy lulls throughout the rest of your day. And when I say complete protein, I mean all the essential amino acids. So just plant-based is not going to work unless you have a combination of different plants that do meet that complete essential amino acid profile. I personally find with clients that the best results typically come when your first meal involves some eggs, maybe some cheese, or even some whey protein. Okay, that concludes phase 2, and I want to give you a little added psychology tip that can help you throughout this process. Focus on finding your keystone or anchor habits. These are the habits that you find you can stick to throughout the day that create a domino effect. So for example, walking after every single meal, because of the impact it has on your blood glucose and insulin, is just going to help your overall energy levels. It'll probably make you sleep better, so it'll trickle into all the other habits throughout your day. Another good example is starting the day with that morning elixir. I find that clients that are able to stick to that end up building positive momentum throughout the day. Because they started with a healthy habit, the rest of the day they're more inclined to make healthy decisions. Okay, phase 3. Now this is weeks 7 through 12, where we're focused on healing your metabolism. And behind the scenes here, what we're trying to do is lower inflammation, improve fat metabolism, and begin resetting your metabolic baseline. Now, this process should already be kickstarted given some of the habits that you're going to implement in phase 1 and phase 2. The biggest priority here is to make sure that you are getting at least 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep every night. That probably means being in bed with no technology being used for 8+ hours. Poor sleep is a direct contributor to higher insulin resistance and fatigue. So if you don't optimize for your sleep, everything else in your day is going to be harder. If you really struggle to shut it down at night, I would advise avoiding screens before you go to bed for at least 1 hour and potentially supplementing with something like magnesium glycinate or magnesium taurate. The next thing you want to do in this phase is to try and add more polyphenols or antioxidants into your diet. So this would be extra virgin olive oil, turmeric, berries, dark chocolate, pomegranate, or green tea. These are all anti-inflammatory powerhouses. The next key piece to this phase is to start cycling your carbohydrates. You should still be trying to avoid simple carbohydrates or GPS as much as possible. But when you are having carbohydrates, ideally, I would limit them to 1 or 2 days throughout the week. So for 4 to 5 days, you probably want to be aiming for less than 75, ideally 50 grams of carbohydrates throughout the day. And on those other 2 days, you're having just moderate amounts of complex carbohydrates. Things like sweet potatoes, quinoa, farro, or some fruits. This is to prevent metabolic adaptation. And again, that doesn't mean you're going out and you're suddenly eating grains, potatoes, and sugar. It means you're prioritizing healthy carbohydrates. Last but not least, during this phase, I want to make sure you're moving every hour or 2 throughout the day. So you're already moving after meals, and ideally you're still doing resistance training 1 to 2 times per week. The last piece to this is to try and make sure that every 60 minutes you're moving for at least 2 or 3. This could be as simple as getting up and doing 20 bodyweight squats at each hour. So I'm not talking about going and having to do a full workout or even a full walk. This is literally just a minute or 2 of some movement to activate your metabolism. And by doing this, you're going to raise your metabolic rate for extended periods after each of those breaks. The psychology tip that I would give you for this phase is to start tracking wins, not weight. At this point, if you've been consistent, you probably will see some weight loss, maybe not as much as you want, but you'll probably also notice your clothes start fitting differently. These are all signs of a healing metabolism. And if you have built up visceral fat in and around your organs, which is the really dangerous kind of fat, your body's gonna burn through that first. So don't be discouraged if you haven't seen the amount of weight loss that you want. Track wins, not weight. This phase is where the magic happens, but it's also where I see a lot of clients start to get frustrated. So keep reminding yourself, we are healing and recalibrating your engine here. This is a long-term game. It's not a short-term sprint. Now for phase 4, we're focused on long-term sustainability. So this is weeks 13 plus. And this is really where you're gonna start to personalize this so that it becomes part of your longevity lifestyle. Our North Star here is to help you protect your metabolism and keep your blood sugar stable without having to obsess over it for the rest of your life. And the first part of this is reintroducing carbohydrates cautiously. If you're using a continuous glucose monitor, you have a huge advantage here. But even if you're not, I would recommend tracking your weight on a daily basis and tracking your energy and mood on a daily basis. If you're tracking the carbohydrates that you're eating and those other metrics, you'll start to be able to map cause and effect, and you'll see which carbohydrates impact you negatively the most. The idea here is to help you find your glucose ceiling. So what's the maximum amount of carbohydrates and what types of carbohydrates are those that will allow you to live and feel at your best? And that's probably going to be a different quantity on days where you're exercising more so your muscles are hungry for sugar versus days when you're slammed with work and family responsibilities and you just don't have time to move that much. Carbohydrates or glucose is the rapidly absorbable fuel that your body uses. So it should be tailored based on your daily energy demands. I think it's really key that if you are still dealing with some metabolic dysfunction or stubborn weight, that you check your A1C and your fasting insulin levels every 3 to 6 months. And if you want to get really granular, you can also ask your doctor for a 2-hour oral glucose tolerance test. Basically, they have you eat some glucose, they track your saliva, and they see over the course of 2 hours how your blood sugar responds. Last but not least, I want you to lean into those anchor habits. Really, you're going to turn them into guardrail habits for your life. Here are a few easy examples. Maybe you just decide, I'm gonna walk or do body weight squats after every time I eat dinner. Or maybe you decide, you know what? During the week, I'm gonna limit all of my meals to a 6-hour window or less. You allow yourself to indulge on weekends, but during the week, you're committed to protecting your metabolism. For me personally, and for some of my clients, doing a 24-hour fast once a week is also a great option. And most of the time, it's on Monday. So you know if you go outside the rails a little bit during the weekend, you're doing a full reset on Monday every week. There are so many other options that you can use to create anchor and guardrail habits. But the thing I wanna leave you with is that systems beat willpower every single time. So if you are sick of feeling like you have to rely on willpower or discipline, I'm telling you, build out systems in your life or work with somebody that can help you do that, and you will find things that you can stick to for the rest of it. Don't aim for perfection. Aim for progress, and progress starts with awareness. Once you start to map cause and effect in your life and you start to track inputs and measure outputs, everything just becomes data. So you can learn from it, you can adjust, and you can move on. As I tell my clients, test, track, tweak, repeat. If any of this was helpful, please send this to somebody that could benefit from watching it. And subscribe to the channel if you want more content that'll help you live better for longer. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you on the next video.